Today I'm joined by Payton Holt to unpack a topic that quietly affects so many couples: codependency. We'll explore where codependent patterns come from, how they show up in our relationships, and what healing looks like in real life therapy. Payton will also walk us through how partners can support each other and what couples can do to build healthier, more balanced, interdependent connections. Payton Holt is a licensed marriage and family therapist and the owner of the Relationship Institute in Spanish Fork, Utah. He specializes in helping individuals and couples navigate codependency, roommate syndrome, and the spectrum between high conflict and total avoidance. Payton also leads community workshops on communication and hosts a women's group focused on healing from codependency. When he's not in the therapy room, he's usually on a ball field, out fishing, or enjoying movie theater popcorn with his wife and 3 kids. We hope you enjoy the show. Hey there, friends. Welcome to another episode of the Stronger Marriage Connection podcast. I'm Dr. Dave here at Utah State University. And Liz is out today, so it's going to be me and our guest today, which I'll tell you about here shortly. Okay, it's not often, friends, that we actually have a guest from my hometown of good old Payson, Utah. So I discovered we both attended Payson High. I'm much older for sure, but that's a fun connection. So I'm excited for our discussion today. We're joined by marriage family therapist Payton Holt, who now practices in Spanish Fork, Utah, to explore a topic that touches far more people than we often acknowledge, and that is codependency. What is it? Where does it come from? And how does it play out in everyday relationships? We'll be sure to answer those questions and others today. But first, welcome to the show, Payton.
Thank you, Dr. Dave. Really grateful to be here.
Yeah, so grateful to have you on. Looking forward to our discussion today. Payton from Payson. I love it. I love it. Hey, can we start our discussion today, Payton, by defining codependency? I think it's a word that is tossed around. A lot of people hear, but I think it'd be helpful for our listeners. You know, what is it exactly and how common is it in couples?
Yeah. Great. Let me tackle that second part first. So how common is it? So codependency is not technically in the DSM, so it's not a diagnosis that a therapist can technically give to somebody like you could with depression or anxiety or bipolar or something like that. So because of that, I don't think there's been a lot of research power behind really figuring out what codependency is. So some of the things I'm going to give you are more anecdotal, like just in my experience. I found that the codependency shows up a lot more often than people are aware of. I've had many people that I see who come in and are kind of surprised to learn that they have some of these traits of codependency. And it's actually helpful to recognize it, learn about it. But I've also noticed just in my own practice that tend to be higher rates among women than men. That could just be my own experience. Again, it's anecdotal. Still have seen a number of men with codependency as well. But I'm going to go into that definition piece because you're totally right. Codependency gets tossed around. We've got these kind of social media buzzwords. This kind of fits in that narcissism category, those words we just love to throw out all the time. But not a lot of people actually understand what codependency is. So first, I'll tell you what it isn't. The most common social media definition that I've picked up on is people often think that codependency is just, I need someone to survive. I got to have a partner. I can't be alone. And that's how they define it. So a lot of people, when they look at that definition, they're like, yeah, that's not me. I love being by myself. But there's a whole lot more to it. So I've come up with a 2-part definition that has gathered it from a whole bunch of other resources that I've read, tried to really define it in a way that makes sense for people. So here's this definition that I use. First part of this is that others' behaviors and emotions impact me far more than they should, to the point that I seek to manage other people's behaviors by managing their emotions. And the second part is I have a need to be needed, meaning I feel value when I do things for others, and I question my value when others reject my offerings or I don't feel like I've been productive enough. This is they play into each other, these two parts of the definition. And hopefully we'll expound on this a little bit more, like, what does that actually mean? But before we do that, I want to share one other thing that I found very helpful. So a resource, my favorite resource, comes from Pia Mellody, her work. She's been kind of groundbreaking in this world of codependency, and wrote a book called Facing Codependence, one I'll reference a little bit throughout this. And she's listed out 5 common core symptoms. So this part I kind of see as like, if it were to be in the DSM, it would be like, this is how you're going to really diagnose what this looks like. So she defines it as struggling with 5 different things. Struggling with 1, healthy levels of self-esteem. 2, struggling with setting functional boundaries. 3, struggling with owning and expressing your reality. 4, struggling with knowing and meeting your own adult needs and wants. And 5, struggling with experiencing and expressing your reality. So there's a lot to unpack there, but to answer your question of like, how do we define it? Those are the ways that I've come to define it in my practice.
Okay. Yeah. Super helpful, Payton. I mean, I'm not a therapist, right? I'm a family scholar, family life education specialist up here. And so, yeah, some of this is new to me, but man, I hear some of these and I'm thinking, yeah, in fact, a lot of females that I know, a lot of those symptoms and behaviors and emotions, man, it's sure ringing true.
We'll be right back after this brief message. And we're back. Well, let's dive right in.
So can you dig in a little bit more with that? I mean, what does it actually look like? Can you give us some examples and even how would I recognize that in myself or even in others?
Yeah. So I'll kind of break down those 2 definitions to give some more specific examples. That the definition that I've created and Pia's list of symptoms. So first part, I've got this wheel of codependency that I use as an assessment tool that gives some direct examples of this. So again, attaching to that first definition of others' behaviors and emotions impact me far more than they should, to the point I seek to manage others' behaviors by managing their emotions. So what that looks like, someone has an uncomfortable emotion, a friend, sibling, a child, your partner. Someone has just an uncomfortable emotion, whether it's coming towards you or they're just experiencing it. What that will trigger is this gut response of, I have to fix this. I got to do something. I don't like that this person's uncomfortable. I got to do something about it. Okay, so that gut response then leads into these problem-solving actions. So you start going to work. You're giving out solutions. You're figuring out how to solve things. And sometimes that's verbally, like you're just giving some feedback and saying, well, you've done this, you tried that. Other times it's actually doing things for somebody, right? I'm going to go out and take care of this because I know this was a stress for you, or this is a struggle. So I'm just going to go do this for you. Right? Like, I don't know. I think an example is, your kid calls you up and tells you, I just got my first speeding ticket and I don't know what to do. Right? And this kind of wheel of codependency, your first response is, oh no, I don't like that you're uncomfortable. So here's what you got to do. Or, you know what, just stop by my place, hand me the ticket, and I'll go take care of it later today. Right? So as it keeps going, there's kind of 2 branches. One, the person that you're trying to solve things for rejects those solutions, or they don't accept it, or they're defensive to it. What that leads to is feelings of like lack of value, wondering, am I good enough? Was there something wrong with what I'm doing? Right? You get really frustrated, and often you'll find yourself just stewing on that problem. Sometimes for hours, for days. You might circle back and start thinking of other ways to solve it, right? It weighs on you. You're owning that person's own responsibility or their emotions. Now, the other way this goes is person accepts it. They accept your offerings, your solutions, your problem solving, and now they feel better. And because they feel better, ultimately, you feel better. And that's like a big aha moment for a lot of the clients that I work with, is realizing that whole cycle is really about me feeling better in the end. It seems like I'm doing this because I love you and I care about you, and right, there's this altruistic feeling, and I'm not going to say that that's false, because I do think there really is true care and love there. But ultimately, I think it's driven by this desire to feel comfortable again, because I'm uncomfortable when you're uncomfortable. So I'm going to go to work to figure all that out and help me feel comfortable again.
Mm-hmm.
That's how you look at the practical application of what does that look like, at least from that definition that I've created. And you'll notice in that it does create this need to be needed. When you start solving everyone else's problems, people start coming to you more to solve more of their problems. And that makes you feel good because you feel needed. Yeah. Go ahead.
I can see some of our listeners being like, yeah, this sounds like parenting, right? This is mothering, but that's what mothers do, right? And we want to care for or pick up, and we don't want to see our children hurt or struggle. And so we want to be there and help them and save them any way that we can. And I think you're right. Like deep down, it's like, from this compassion or this love and wanting them to not have to suffer. But ultimately, I mean, this pattern continues. It could start right even with a baby, and then younger kids, and then adult children. I think some of our listeners would be like, "Huh, that sounds just like my mom," right? How is this? Ultimately, how does this affect relationships? I mean, because there's going to be some with either way, with the person saying no, don't worry about it, mom or dad or whatever. I got this ticket or whatever it is, with relationships or any kind of struggle that they're going through. Like it's a natural tendency for a parent to want to jump in and help. So whether they reject that or they accept that, tell us a little bit about the dynamics. I mean, ultimately, because on the outside, it's like, oh no, that's great. That's what a parent should do. But walk us through that a little bit more when that pattern, continues for months, years, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think you're seeing that there certainly is a level of dependence that comes with kids, right? When you've got an infant, you have to do everything for them, and toddlers still, you're doing everything for them. But this parenting piece you've brought up, I've seen that it actually like pulls out these, if there are any codependent tendencies, parenting is going to really pull them to the forefront. Because as you go, it starts out with these well-intentioned, I don't want my kid to suffer. I don't want them to feel bad or to hurt. But what often happens is you end up overprotecting them. You end up doing too much, right? They come to you, and you're freshmen in high school finally start to focus on their grades, and they come to you at the end of the semester and they say, I totally forgot that I've got this huge assignment due tomorrow and I really haven't done anything. Right. That codependent part of you is going to want to jump in and say, you know what? Don't worry about it. We're going to run over here and we're going to do this and that and this, and we're going to get it all together and I'm going to do it all for you and you're going to get an A still. Rather than being able to have a teaching moment where you talk to your kid about procrastination, preparation, and allowing them to face some of the natural consequences of their own decisions. And when you save your kids over and over from the natural consequences, you end up doing what we call enabling. You're enabling behaviors that may actually be dysfunctional or harmful. This is especially seen in more of the dramatic cases, right, where you've got a child who maybe starts abusing substances, and you continue to provide them money because they're requesting money and they say it's for this or they say it's for that, and you just never say no to them. But you end up just enabling more of those negative patterns. So that's one area that's pretty big and impacts parent-child relationship in a lot of ways. But now you add in like having a partner, and your partner is seeing some of these overprotective, maybe enabling behaviors. And what often happens is partner will try to overcompensate. So now they'll go to the other side of the spectrum and they'll show up in kind of authoritarian or harsh ways, right? Where they feel like they have to teach their kids a lesson because over here they're escaping that lesson. And now you start getting a lot of tension between the couple, parents, right? As they're starting to battle between you're too harsh or you're too soft, and that creates difficulty, right? And now the kids are seeing difficulty there, and now you're feeling a little bit more down because of this tension, and now you're showing up a little different in your relationships with friends, and that's just kind of one angle. There's a lot of different angles. I'll share one other thing that I've seen, which is common, is for people who have these patterns of codependency, they tend to take things pretty personally. So every little thing someone says or does can get to them. And that makes it hard for people to give you feedback. People will feel like they kind of walk on eggshells around you, which is ironic because the codependent person feels that way too. They're feeling like they're walking on eggshells trying to manage everyone else's emotions. But what often happens is when you take things, any sort of feedback personally, then it explodes, it blows up, right? An example, I had a client send an email to their in-laws dealing with some family drama, and their partner simply stated, I wish you would have run that by me before sending that email. On the face, seems pretty reasonable, but when you take it personally, like this client did in that moment, it got really intense, right? This activated this kind of shame tailspin. They started questioning, what's wrong with me? Why didn't I do that? I must have messed something up. I'm not a good partner. I'm a terrible person, right? They start spiraling, and their partner seeing them do this, and from their partner's eyes, this feels like an overreaction. Just saying, I wish you would have clued me in. I'm not saying you're a terrible person, right? And so it gets to the point where the partner thinks to themselves, man, should have never said something. I just won't say anything in the future, right? And so now your partner becomes nervous or hesitant to even give you feedback about things because you may just take it personally and kind of blow it up bigger than it needs to be.
Yeah, man, these are great examples. Yeah, that I just kind of witnessed even with parents around me. with that first example of the parents, being extra, soft and giving everything, then another parent coming in a little bit more, harsh. And then I've even seen some parents just kind of, sneakily being like, hey, okay, hey, just so the other parent doesn't find out, or you're slipping some money, or kind of doing some of these almost behind the scenes, don't let them find out, because I'm the kind of the nice one or compassionate one, and he's pretty strict, or vice versa with the parents. But and then that can't be helpful at all. I mean, ultimately, that puts a wedge in the couple relationship, let alone, the parent-child relationship. Again, thinking these are good intentions, and I want to help this child, or this who's struggling, and I don't want to see them struggle with these emotions.
We'll be right back after this brief message. And we're back. Well, let's dive right in.
I'm curious, Payton, do you think that some of this stems from even the parents? Maybe they didn't have it all. Maybe they were raised, didn't have kind parents, or we didn't have a lot of money or resources, and I couldn't play sports or do any of these activities, back in my day. So I want to make sure that my child, doesn't have to struggle. They want to have all these opportunities. You know what I'm saying? Almost kind of the pendulum has swung, and I just want to give them the world because I didn't have it. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, I think it can, for sure. We certainly have that tendencies as humans to go from one end of a spectrum to another. Excuse me. But going from one end of dysfunction to the other is also dysfunction. Right? Just keep swinging it. And yeah, we do. That's a generational thing. Very common. We experience one thing, like I'm never going to do that with my kids. And you end up going too far. And I think generationally, you look back, 50, 60 years, and that generation of parents, broadly speaking, tended to be more strict, tended to have harsher punishments, more physical punishments. And you didn't talk a lot about how you were actually feeling. There's a lot of topics that were just taboo. You didn't talk about in general. So I think we've seen a swing, right? And a common phrase these days is gentle parenting, right? We've gone from one end to the other, trying to avoid that. But I also think some of these traits of codependency stem from other things, still related to our childhood, right? A lot of what we experience as adults are things that came out of our experience as kids, as teens. So a really common one that I've noticed is something in childhood pairs their value with what they can do for others or their performance. And it's often not intentional. It's not parents who are intentionally giving this message that you're only good if you get A's. There's just kind of something inside that child that interpreted it that way. And so they began to believe that I'm only as good as what I can do for other people or how well I can perform. And that really alters the view of oneself, changes that kind of core self-esteem, and leads people to experience a lot of shame if they're not living up to that. And that becomes a big driver for continuing to do things for others, because that's how they feel good about themselves. And that leaks into the parenting piece, like you're talking about.
Mm-hmm. I'm curious now. Thanks for all these, I think, wonderful examples. I think our listeners are going to be able to relate either as maybe as an adult child, and they're thinking, man, this describes my parent to a T or whatever. Or another listener is like, this is me, maybe as a mom or as a parent. Or can you walk us through? We wouldn't have time, obviously, to walk through the entire treatment plan, Payton, but can you give us an idea almost from the three perspectives? Let's say that I'm a 22, 23, 25-year-old or whatever, and I'm thinking, man, this is my how can I be different? Because this is my parent you're talking about here, or even from a parent perspective, if they're hearing this, they're like, holy smokes, I've heard that word, but that is actually me too. All those those behaviors and emotions, that is me. Walk us through some of the, I don't know, the treatment plan, or what does that look like with therapy? I mean, how do you help someone with that?
Yeah, great question. So, my first thing is acknowledgement. I'm a big believer that you really can't change a problem until you acknowledge that there is a problem. And that's a big part of Pia Mellody's work that I've referenced, that book, Facing Codependence. That's pretty foundational, I think, because it's in the name of that title, right? The whole thing she talks about is you've got to face it. And I found that to be true with the clients that I work with. You have to be willing to first face it and accept that codependency is happening. This is actually a really difficult piece for many. It's very scary because most people who experience codependency are all too familiar with shame. By shame, I mean that feeling of like, I'm not enough. I'm not good enough. So it's super scary to face this because it feels like by doing so that you're essentially taking responsibility for any dysfunction in any of your relationships. And it's like, oh, well, it's all my fault because of this codependency stuff. And that's too big to bear. And I believe that. It is too big to bear. And it's not all yours. The truth is, not all the hard things happening in your relationships are all your fault, but that's just what it feels like when you start to face this. So a big part of this treatment process involves self-compassion, being able to sit with yourself and be compassionate with yourself. And I've found that for a lot of people who experience codependency, empathy is actually one of their superpowers. They're really empathetic. They don't want people to feel bad, and they feel that. They take it on when someone else is hurting. They can take this on, and they are some of the most compassionate people on the planet. The irony is they struggle to give themselves any compassion. Hardly none. That inner voice is so critical, so judgmental. And so learning to give themselves the same compassion that they freely give to others, giving to themselves is a big starting point, especially with facing codependency in general and all the implications. So that leads into rebuilding their self-esteem. I think that this becomes a very core part of treatment. It's rebuilding from the inside out, because for most, their self-esteem has been outside in, right? I feel good about me when I think others feel good about me. I feel good about me when I'm succeeding, being super productive and checking off all those boxes on my checklist every day. But that's all outside in, right? The inside out is embracing what I believe is a spiritual truth, that all humans have the same innate value. Not any human comes to this earth with any more or any less value than the next. And there's nothing you can do or not do that will change that inherent value. It's unchanging, stays the same all the time, just for being you. And as people are able to really grasp that, and not just intellectually, right? I've got a lot of clients who say like, yeah, I mean, I get that. That makes sense in my head, but I don't believe it in my heart. That's the difficulty. So a lot of the actual treatment, the therapy is about getting that message from the head down to the heart. And that comes through repetition of self-compassion, repetition of positive affirmations, repetition of challenging every shame thought or belief that comes up. And that takes time. as someone is able to do that, then they're able to feel good about who they are, which makes it a whole lot easier to start developing functional and healthy boundaries in their life. Right? One of the common difficulties for anyone experiencing codependency is being able to say the word no. It feels really guilty and hard to say no to somebody, right? And so that often overstretches people, and they take on way more than they can handle because they don't want to let anyone down. And when you don't feel good about you, having boundaries is very hard. It's easy to have it flipped back, and you question, am I even right in having this boundary? Maybe me trying to have this boundary is the problem. But when you feel more secure about yourself, you've built your self-esteem, then that kind of powers your ability to have healthy boundaries and to be able to say no in a loving way and not feel all shame-filled or guilty about it. So that I don't know, that's kind of a brief overview of what that treatment process looks like. There's certainly more to it, and doing actual therapy and support groups and Codependence Anonymous, right? There's tons of resources that can all support that, but that's kind of, 40,000 foot view of what that process looks like.
Yeah, super helpful, Payton. I appreciate that. I can see that this is this can be challenging. I mean, like other struggles and problems, because it takes work, and kind of the natural person in us just wants to. It's just much easier to have the compassion and call it compassion and just help, even though it's not ultimately helping, and it's not helping me. But man, it takes that real change takes work and probably consistency. And then maybe I'm going to slip, and then and I come back to this and boundaries and learning to say no, because it's much easier to say yes, right? So change, this requires intentional, probably consistent work, and then knowing, I'm gonna struggle and slide down a little bit, but that persistent, because then I guess when they slide and they do give in, then maybe the shame kicks in again, because now it's like, I'm going to therapy, or I'm receiving, I know I shouldn't have done that, but they just really needed that type. Do you see those types of shame slides almost when they're even trying to be better?
Yeah, all the time. All the time. That's why that really grasping that self-compassion skill is so important, because that's just so easy to slide back and forth, just like you're saying. But as you develop more of that compassion, that kindness for oneself, then you can give yourself a break, just like you would anyone else, right? Your best friend were dealing with the same issue. You wouldn't beat him up. You'd be like, oh, come on, you're doing just fine. Sure, you slipped. That's okay. It's part of the process. Keep going. That same message you so easily give to your friend is this very message you have to give to yourself.
Yeah. Walk me through a little bit more of that. That's interesting, because even as a partner, let's say that my partner or my spouse is the one who's just really struggling with this. And then maybe I'm at home and I see, here's a situation between my wife, my adult child, let's say, and me as a partner being like, hey, no, remember what you learned. You can't do that, type of, I can see that kind of creating even more contention there. How can partners, I guess, support each other through this? Both partners, because they both play a role in this.
Yeah. So I think what I'm going to say is similar to the got to acknowledge there's a problem to be able to work on a problem. It's super important for partners to become aware of what codependency really is. And I think that's half the battle. Just understanding those patterns and symptoms. Learn about it, read books, listen to podcasts, get educated, because that's going to be a big strength. And so what you highlighted, it's a big part of it, like be patient and understanding. On both sides, these patterns took decades to develop. They're not going to disappear overnight. And so just having some assurance that you're both committed to it, that you're both working to support each other, and I tell couples I work with, you need to define specific language that is language of support, right? In that moment where the one partner is saying, "Oh, I see you sliding with this kid and you're starting to rescue." You've got to have some language that you've already decided on that you can say that in a way that's not going to trigger some of that shame or defensiveness, but will be a friendly reminder, a helpful reminder that, hey, I'm here and I want to support you. And I see that you're kind of struggling. A phrase, I think this was coined by Brene Brown, popular one, but I love this phrase. It's the story I'm telling myself. I will teach my clients on both sides, person is experiencing the codependency, partner is not, to use this phrase to clarify situations. Because often by doing this, you could nip an issue right in the bud, right from the get-go. So some examples of what that would actually look like, right? Partner A, not experiencing codependency, tells to partner B, I've got some feedback for you. And, I don't like the way you handled this situation with our child. Tendency for partner B is to take that personally and start to feel shameful about how they did something wrong and they're not good enough. And if partner A notices that, they can say something like, hey, the story I'm telling myself is that you're taking my feedback really personally, maybe even feeling like I'm attacking you. Is that true? Right? And then you get to deal with it right there in the moment, because partner B can be like, yeah, isn't that what you're doing? You're attacking me. No, right? You can just deal with it. Or on the flip side, partner B can use that same tool to get to the heart of something, right? They can say, the story I'm telling myself is that you meant to hurt my feelings when you said that. And now partner A can be like, no, I'm so sorry. That was not my intention. Or if it was, they can own it. Be like, yeah, you know what? That was not right of me. Let me rephrase this. So that becomes a really helpful way to create dialogue around these traits of codependency. Because as you use that phrase, the story I'm telling myself, you take out the accusations. You take out the character assassination. You're just simply letting someone into your own inner world, saying, this is what I'm thinking, right or wrong. This is what I'm thinking right now.
Mm-hmm. So when you're helping, I'm guessing, Payton, that this is a couple thing, right? I mean, because they both need to be aware of this to know how, really they can help each other with those types of conversations and, helpful, patient conversations rather than the blaming and then shaming pattern that's going on. Are we talking is this weeks, months, years? I guess it really depends couple from couple, but kind of what's your approach?
Yeah, you're talking more of the actual treatment of couple experiencing this. Yeah. So my approach, months is probably more in that area. Again, this is decades to create, so weeks is hard to get real change, but months for sure. Yeah, somewhere in that 3 to 6 month time frame is often how long I'll be working with couples, enough to bring out a lot of these tendencies, enough to show the patterns, and enough for them to understand and learn some new tools and skills on how to communicate. But I often build in quite a bit of individual work through that process too, to help the person experiencing codependency to really recognize it more in their own life and the underlying parts, like why they go that. At times, I'd like having the partner there to witness some of that work. And in other times, it's nice to just be able to work with that person.
Yeah.
We'll be right back after this brief message. And we're back. Well, let's dive right in.
Wow, this has been So helpful. Payton, you're the director of the Relationship Institute in Spanish Fork, Utah. Can you tell us about the Institute, what you do, any other resources you offer, how people can find out more about you?
Yeah, yeah, of course. So at the Relationship Institute, we try to practice what it says in our name. We're all everything to do with relationships, marriage, family, um, even just individually if you're struggling with certain relationships. So we offer therapy in all those modalities, individual, couples, and family therapy. We also offer workshops for couples, mostly workshops about learning better communication skills, workshops related to overcoming roommate syndrome. And I do offer some groups as well. So group therapy, the one that we're hoping to get started again here in the new year, is a women's healing codependency group. It's a powerful group where you're able to connect with other women who've experienced similar things. And there's such power in being able to hear other stories and recognize I'm not alone. I'm not the only one struggling with this. And that becomes powerful. So in terms of trying to connect with the Relationship Institute, we have our website, relationshipinstituteutah.com. My contact information is on there, our phone number, my email address. So reaching out through any of those ways is a good way to get in contact.
Yeah, wonderful. Thanks so much, Payton. Hey, before we let you go, we like to ask all of our questions, or all of our guests, a couple of questions. And the first question is related to the really the name of our podcast, Stronger Marriage Connection. In your mind, what is, I don't know the key, but what is a key to a stronger marriage connection?
I'm going to answer this from this angle of codependency that we've been talking about, which is to lean into empathy over problem solving every time. Start with empathy. There's so many interactions that just get way off track, or they end up becoming an argument when they don't need to be. If we could just start with empathy, learn to listen, learn to be able to say like, that sounds so hard. I'm sorry you're going through that. Even asking, what do you need from me? Do you need some help figuring this out? Do you just need me to give you a hug? That empathy piece is so big, and it's bonding. When we express and feel empathy, it bonds us together. That would be my one go-to for a good strategy for relationships.
Yeah. Oh man, you're speaking my language, my friend. Yeah, I love that empathy, compassion. So critically important. And then we'll wrap up with your takeaway of the day. If there's a take-home message you hope our listeners will remember from our discussion today, what would that be?
Yeah, we've covered a lot. Codependency can be this kind of really big thing, but I guess my hope is the takeaway would be that there's hope. There is so much hope. Relationships can be so much better when you recognize some of these patterns that are getting in the way, get in the way of what you really want. They get in the way of that deeper connection and care. And being able to recognize these patterns helps you actually work through it and start to do something about it. And hopefully you hear from this that there's ways to treat it. There's lots of resources. You're not alone. So that's my one takeaway is hope. Things can be better.
Absolutely love it. Yeah. And for our listeners, we'll be sure to put those links to the Relationship Institute in our show notes. So be sure to check those out. I think that's my takeaway today too, as I've been thinking the whole time. And that's exactly it. I echo what you're talking about. To recognize this, if some of this is kind of either, I don't know, stings or resonates, or, you feel this little nudge or this pull, like, man, that actually, I can relate to some of what he's talking about there. And it's been maybe years or decades of this pattern. There's still, there's time to change, to become better, to heal relationships, partner couple relationships, parent-child relationships, to do things a different way. So yeah, don't give up. Don't give in. There's help. There's resources. And we know more now than ever before. So it does. It takes work, and it takes consistent effort. Whether it's therapy or books or podcasts or listening. But yeah, it's worth the effort. Those relationships, it's people that are more important than problems. So, man, this has been so helpful. Hey, Payton, thank you so much for coming on, for taking time to share so much about codependency and how we can become better and healthier through the first recognizing it and then striving for resources to help us to improve. So sure appreciate your time today.
Yeah, thank you. I'm grateful to be here.
Okay, friends, that does it for us. We will see you next time on another episode of the Stronger Marriage Connection podcast. And in honor of what Liz typically says, remember, it's the small things that create a stronger marriage connection. We'll see you next time. Thanks for joining us today. Hey, do us a favor and take a second to subscribe to our podcast and the Utah Marriage Commission YouTube channel at Utah Marriage Commission, where you can watch this and every episode of the show. Be sure to smash the like button, leave a comment, and share this episode with a friend. You can also follow and interact with us on Instagram at Stronger Marriage Life and Facebook at Stronger Marriage. So be sure to share with us which topics you loved or which guests we should have on the show next. If you want even more resources to improve your marriage or relationship connection, visit strongermarriage.org, where you'll find free workshops, e-courses, in-depth webinars, relationship surveys, and more. Each episode of Stronger Marriage Connection is hosted and sponsored by the Utah Marriage Commission at Utah State University. And finally, a big thanks to our producer, Rex Polanis, and the team at Utah State University, and you, our audience. You make this show possible. The opinions, findings, conclusions, and recommendations expressed in this podcast do not necessarily reflect the views of the Utah Marriage Commission